am the policy coordinator here in Virginia for the Chesapeake Climate Action.
Well, thanks again. Movement about creation care and things of that nature. So that's how I got here. One of the things that I've been privileged to work on is this notion of renewable portfolio standards. That is, what's Virginia's position going to be about new energies as versus conventional energy, or what I like to sometimes call 20th century energy? Are we going to do the things necessary to get into wind and solar and get away from coal and in some instances also away from natural gas? I have sort of taken what many people would see as a hardline position. One of the reasons I don't support all the above approach to energy is because I believe that we will never wean ourselves away from oil and fossil fuels as long as we continue to find ways to burn them, find ways to find them. One of the things that is frustrating to me is that you all know that we have the State Corporation Commission, right? And they give the power companies permission to do certain things or not do certain things. And one of the ways they come about how to do something is to say, okay, what's the cost? Because we want to make sure the cost is low to the ratepayer, as cheap to the ratepayer as possible. The problem is, and I'm awful at math, right? That's why I'm a lawyer. I'm awful at math. But even I can figure out that it all depends on what you want to count. And so one of the things that we've worked on is this notion of externalities, right? What is it that you're really going to count or factor into your equation when you're trying to see what is the least cost or the least cost to the ratepayer? It's one thing to look at a sort of straight arithmetic calculation about dollars and cents. You know, how much is it going to cost to build this electric plant? How much is it going to cost to build a wind or solar generating plant? And then, generally speaking, because the economies of scale are better for 20th century energy because we've been doing it longer, right? I mean, remember when computers used to cost so much and now they cost relatively little? That's economies of scale. We get more efficient over time in making stuff. So we count that, but we don't count the societal costs. The number of children who are becoming asthmatic, the number of children or the health effects across the board. We don't measure the impact on the environment in the way that this wonderful film did. So that's one of the issues that we have to wrestle with, is externalities. Because when you read in the paper, at least in my judgment, when you read in the paper that it's cheaper to do certain things, it's because of what is counted as the cost. And there's a whole bunch of stuff that we're not counting as the cost, and I believe would at least even the playing field, if not tilted towards 21st century energies. Another thing is that, okay, how do we get these economies of scale to come into effect? The best way, in my judgment, is to make the RPS, that is the Renewable Portfolio Standard, mandatory. Because if we mandate it, then what we know is that people can come to Virginia, open businesses, and know that there's a marketplace. You know, mandating always has, there's two sides to the coin, but I think it's important that we focus on the fact that we can create markets and marketplaces so that people can bring innovative ideas into the Commonwealth and really open up businesses that will lead to the type of Virginia that we want to see, a Virginia that's based on green energy and new energies, and at the same time provide jobs, provide new tax revenues for the Commonwealth. So I think that's awfully, awfully, awfully important. So I guess those are the two biggest things that we've sort of been wrestling with from the RPS viewpoint or standpoint. That is, again, trying to mandate it and trying to get a better accounting for what really are the societal costs of how we go about with our energy consumption and the types of energies that we use. Again, I think the most exciting thing about tonight is being with you. I'm going to yield the floor, and then hopefully we can have some questions and answers and have a good discussion about where we are in Virginia and where we hope to go. Thank you.
Your thoughts on this? One of the things that I really like to draw attention to, and that always speaks to me, I've seen this film a couple times now because we've been doing it across Virginia, is that sense of time, that sense of where we are now compared to where we were when it comes to the size of the glaciers, when it comes to the average temperature in our atmosphere, and then even further ahead, comparing where we are right now to where a child born today is going to be. It's where are we now and where do we want to go? Where are we now and what future are we setting up a child born today to exist in, to try to live in? Is it a future where melting glaciers have contributed to sea level rise to the extent that Norfolk is underwater? Or that residents are being flooded even more than they already are, which is even more than past generations were? Is it a central Virginia that's facing more and more frequent severe storms like the derecho of last summer? Or the winter that never really was in 2012? Or are we going to take the action today to change that future to the extent that we can, begin to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions by passing strong policies incentivizing renewable energy, by seeing an offshore wind farm off the coast of Virginia Beach versus an oil platform? Is a child born today going to grow up and say, thank you, you started taking action? Or going to grow up and say, what were you doing while the atmosphere was heating, while our planet was becoming unrecognizable? In Virginia, our role is to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions, which comes down to supporting and passing policies that will bring us a renewable energy future. And it comes down to pushing our utilities in the state to transition away from fossil fuels that are spewing more and more carbon into our atmosphere and to a future of renewable energy for the sake of that child born today. And again, every time I see that film, I think about that time lapse, that contrast, because it's such a central part of the film. And that's my reaction. So to open up the discussion, let's hear just a few words about what's your reaction sitting here in Virginia and watching that film.
Scary.
Say it again?
Scary.
Scary. What are some others? Shocking.
Surprise me at all, but I can't tell you the number of people who have said nasty things back to me, calling me a dirty, trashy, liberal, Democrat psycho or something, because I say that I can't tell you how many times I have seen people's cars, even just from a rainstorm, start to float on certain streets in the old areas of town in Norfolk. It's really pathetic, the number of people who actually just told me that I'm liberal weirdo or something because I believe that my car will start to float if I drive into an area like there's a part of town there called Stockley Gardens there in the Ghent area of Norfolk, in which there will be just a rainstorm, and if you happen to drive through, your car literally might start to float. It's pathetic.
Yeah, and I think you hit the nail on the head that we need, one of the first things we need to do is make sure you're not alone. Is to make sure the next climate event in Richmond has 100 people. And that's minimum. We need to keep growing, and we need to get bigger and bigger. And we need to build up our legislators and policymakers to be champions on energy and climate change, so that we can make a difference with our energy policy and with our energy future in Virginia. And so let's open it up to some questions or ideas that you have about what we can do to build and get bigger, or to build up more legislative champions, or questions for Senator McEachin as well.
Green or environmental people are not, I'm sorry, politics basically runs on money. Business supports their politicians, politicians kind of listen to their supporters. If business is supporting, if oil people, fracking people are pouring all the money into a political campaign, which has gotten ridiculously expensive, and green people give like 10 cents to every $15, we're going to keep on the losing side.
So let me just talk a little bit about that, and there's a lot of truth in what you said. I am going to use some examples, but please understand that I'm not endorsing anything. I'm just talking about my personal experiences. But as caucus chair of the Senate Democratic Caucus, I have an incredibly, given the fact that most people view me as a progressive, I have an incredibly hard time raising money from progressive organizations, and certainly the environmental community is among that group. One of the things that's encouraging, though, and I don't know how closely you've been following in the newspapers, is Tom Steyer. He is a former hedge fund guy. He comes from San Francisco. He's got a whole pile of money. He's a billionaire, and he's coming to play in Virginia this year. He's going to do some independent expenditures around the issue of the environment, and he's mobilizing a lot of the CEOs that are into these green energies to actually participate and to talk about on camera how they can grow the economy. So hopefully that'll be the start of folks thinking about the green economy and how beneficial it could be for Virginia. But I also want to take a little bit of a different tack for just a second and talk about other things that can be done other than money. Not that money is not important, but there are a lot of other things that can be done. And one of the things I need everybody in here to understand is that what we do as elected officials is incredibly personal. And you wouldn't think that, right? You would think it'd be all about business, et cetera, et cetera. But you need to know there's nothing more personal than having your name on a ballot. There's nothing more personal than going door to door in the rain, looking for votes or looking for people to sign your petitions. There's nothing more personal than being the target of an attack ad. And there's nothing more personal than being declared the winner on election night. Everything we do is incredibly personal. If I just told you I have a lot of trouble raising money from progressive organizations. But if you listen to my district, if you work with the people in my district, if you sort of have the background that I have, you end up doing these things anyway, despite the lack of traditional campaign funds. And that's because you've established relationships with people. People like over in the Carver area of my district who will go door to door with me in the rain, trying to get votes, who introduce me to their civic association groups, who will write emails to me seemingly in the dark of night because they're there when I get to the General Assembly in the morning saying, hey, you're doing the right thing. You would be surprised the effect of emails on General Assembly members. We are incredibly egotistical, right? I mean, we've got enough nerve to put our name on the ballot, just sort of let it all hang out there and say, vote for me and I'll set you free, right? That takes a huge amount of ego. And then every January we get swept off to the Capitol, they sort of raise the gates, we're in a bubble, and all of a sudden we don't know what's going on in our districts anymore. Excuse me. But just a small tidal wave of emails can really alert us to important things in the district and sort of have a magnifying effect far beyond their numbers. Now, I'm not talking about the emails where you can tell that they're all written by the same person and they're just given to a bunch of members and they press send. I'm talking about the thoughtful emails. There might only be 5 or 10 of those on a given day where people have actually sat down, composed something. Doesn't have to be eloquent, but you can tell it's being done by them and it's sincere and it's coming from your district. Those things are incredibly powerful to have happen to us. A couple things about that. I don't mean to go on too long, but sort of the citizen lobbying thing I think is an important aspect of what we do at the General Assembly.
Talk about that as much as you want.
Okay, all right. So, mistakes that I have seen from citizen lobbyists. You will get an email, and yes, I can hit reply and send something back on email, that's fine. But it's better if you take the time to put your phone number down. It's better if you also take the time to give me a snail mail address, because there might be a lot of different ways I want to communicate with you in the future on different things that are going on and given your interest that you've expressed to me. Because believe me, I'm not the only one of the 140 of us who actually categorizes you, right? If you write me on the environment, you're going to end up in a section of my database that says Enviro. If you write me on guns, you're going to end up in that section. So, and you can write me on more than one area, and you'll be in a bunch of different areas, right? So we all do that to a certain extent. So the more personal the email or the communicative device, the more personal it is, and the easier you make it for me to respond to you, the better. The further away you get from that, the more you have to do. For instance, now this is on camera, so this won't happen this year, watch, but Gun Owners of America will send me 5 postcards, all from Charles City County, all from the same people, year in, year out. You can tell it's being mass produced, although it's only 5, but you can tell it's sort of a mass produced thing, right? That is wholly ineffective. It would be ineffective anyway because of given their stances and my stances, but you don't stand a prayer of convincing somebody with a pre-printed postcard. I just don't think you do, unless you're going to deliver them by the boatload. I'll give you an example. I don't know how many of you all are familiar with Highland Springs, Virginia, but Highland Springs is a part of my district, and when I first ran, I ran well across my district, but I got clobbered in Highland Springs. And I wish I could remember the issue, but I promise you it was an environmental issue. And someone decided to deliver some petitions to me. Now, normally I would tell you petitions are worthless, right? I mean, we walk around, we know how easy it is to get somebody to sign your petition. All you gotta do, stand in front of Martin's, people will sign your petition if you just ask them to. So petitions, I'm not gonna be that impressed by petitions. But remember, I said the further away you get from personal, the more you have to sort of bring the noise. I mean, we had petitions, I promise you, they were as high as my knee. And they were all from Highland Springs. And they had addresses that you could read, legible addresses. They had phone numbers. And I actually, because I'm a rookie legislator, right? I'm the worst guy in the world. I am super anal at that point. And I want to talk to all these people. I had my staff start drafting letters. I took the time to call people at night and say, look, I don't remember what the issue was, but I remember that I was on the same side as the petitions. And I promise you, before that happened, I could walk down the streets of Highland Springs, the clouds could part, a sunbeam could come down on my shoulder, a dove could descend, a voice could say, this is my son, and I would still lose Highland Springs. Since those petitions, I've never lost Highland Springs, because it gave me an opportunity to talk to people, let them know I was where they were, and we had some synergy. So you can make a difference. Yes, money is important. Money has its place, but people power is just as important. And right now, you have 100 legislators in the House of Delegates who are up for re-election. Some have easy elections, some have difficult elections, but they all have elections, and they're all looking for friends. And it's not enough just to go in there and work the tables or hand out lit. You want to try to get some contact with the legislator, and it ought not be hard because there's not going to be that many people at headquarters. I mean, let's face it, it's just not going to be that many people. And establish a relationship with them. Be in relationship with them. The people who walk door to door with me know how many children I have. I know how many children they have. I know what their quirks are. They know what my quirks are. And guess who gets their phone calls returned first when they call? It's the people you know. It's not necessarily the people who give money. It's the people you know. All of you all have great interpersonal skills. I know you do. All you have to do is get out there, work with the candidate of your choice in whatever party you want to work with, and establish that relationship. And just because they may have an easy election or they are unopposed does not mean they're not looking for friends, because any good elected official is thinking 2 things, the election today and the election tomorrow. And I might need a whole bunch of friends for the election tomorrow.